you wrote there are as many connections in a cubic centimeter in brain as there are stars in the Milky Way galaxy. So just a tiny little cubic centimeter, and that's 100 billion, 200 billion, 300 billion connections, as many stars as there are in the galaxy. And there's all this crazy way that, that we become who we become. And this is everything from I want to talk about these experiments because I think these are things that we typically don't really realize, but and these aren't, sometimes they're not even experiments, they're accidentals. There was the group of 170,000 Romanian orphan children. And that was because of a celibacy tax, that if you didn't procreate, they wanted to increase the amount of population there. If you didn't procreate, then you would get taxed, and they would go and make sure that you're procreating. And so a lot of people had too many kids that they couldn't feed and take care of, and then those kids went into the orphanages. And then they were deprived before the age of 2 of these important social connections and important just ways that they cognitively develop. And then now we see a lot of the issues in terms of their cognition and their social ability. And you wrote about this, and it was very fascinating. There's another example after this I want to hit, but what do you like?
Yeah, it's just, it's critically important that kids get things like touch and speech and so on. Babies get this because that's how essentially the human brain drops into the world kind of half-baked. Unlike other, if you ever see a giraffe get born or a cow or a dolphin or whatever, after 30 minutes they're walking around or the dolphin is swimming around and so on. But human babies, if you guys have ever seen one, don't do that after 30 minutes. And so the question is, why do humans take so long to develop compared to every other species?
Yep.
And it's because of this issue that we drop out half-baked, and that has really been the secret that's led to our species success, because what we're able to do is absorb the culture around us and specifically absorb all the learnings that have happened so far. So an alligator now is exactly like an alligator a million years ago. There hasn't been sort of a building alligator literature or science that they can step out on top of. But that's what we get to do. But anyway, with the Romanian orphans, it turned out that there were too many in these orphanages, and so the thinking that they were being helpful, the people who worked there said, look, don't pick them up and don't talk to them because then they cry more when you put them down, so just don't bother doing that. And what happened is this whole generation of children didn't develop correctly. They've got deep cognitive problems. So it's been one of these, Mother Nature's cruel experiments where you get to see the consequences of this sort of thing.
And then there's another really insanely interesting example with Whitman, who was just a normal guy, cared about his family, cared about his work, and then all of a sudden was having a tumor press against his amygdala in his brain, and that caused him, right, this is biology that caused him to go out and murder his wife and his wife's mother and then 13 people. And just again, this is another whole, we'll touch on some of the more free will determinism stuff, but that just blows my mind that you can just be pushed by a tumor into that kind of crazy, you lose control.
Right. So for those of you who don't know, Charles Whitman was the guy who almost exactly 50 years ago climbed up the tower at the University of Texas at Austin and did what was essentially America's first mass shooting. And he murdered lots of people. He murdered 16 and then 39 people were wounded. And it was just a completely random act of violence. He was shooting pedestrians and the people that came to help them and the ambulance drivers that came to help them. It was this horrible act. And right, and so by the time the deputies got to the top of the tower and were able to kill him, immediately what everyone wanted to know is, who is this guy? And it turned out the interesting part of the story is that Whitman wanted to know the same answer. He was extreme, he was high IQ and articulate, and he kept a diary for a year before this, monitoring and describing the changes that he was feeling in himself, about how he was becoming more and more angry. He had this anger, he had this aggression. So he went to a psychiatrist, but this was in 1966, and there was no brain scanning or anything like that. And he talked to the psychiatrist. He didn't get any meaningful help there, and so he monitored this whole thing, and then he wrote a suicide note on his typewriter the night before, where he said, "When this is all over, I want an autopsy to be performed," and that's exactly what happened. And that's how they found the tumor.